They say the person you divorce isn't the same person you married, but Daniel never expected Marcus to be cruel. She never expected him to laugh in her face as she signed away 7 years of her life for nothing. Standing on the wet steps of the courthouse, shivering in a thin coat, she watched him smirk, checking his Rolex. "Hope you enjoy the bus ride back to your mum's," he sneered. He thought he had won. He thought she was finished. But he didn't see the black Rolls-Royce Phantom gliding silently through the traffic, or the man inside who had been waiting for this exact moment for a decade. Marcus was about to learn that some mistakes cost more than money. The mediation room at the law firm of Sterling Hearth and Moore on West 54th Street smelled of stale coffee and aggressive cologne. It was a smell Daniel Vance would associate with nausea for the rest of her life. She sat on one side of the mahogany table, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. Across from her sat Marcus, the man she had supported through medical school, the man she had worked 2 jobs for, so he could start his private dermatology practice in the Upper East Side. He looked immaculate in a navy Brioni suit, his hair gelled to perfection, tapping a silver Montblanc pen against the divorce decree. "Come on, Elle." Marcus sighed, checking his watch. It was a Patek Philippe she had bought him for his 30th birthday, using the last of her inheritance from her grandmother. "I have a consultation at 2. Let's wrap this up. You're getting the Toyota and the savings account. It's more than fair." The savings account had $4,000 in it. The practice she helped build was now worth millions, but the prenup, a document she had signed blindly at 23 because she was in love and trusted him, locked her out of everything. "It's not about the money, Marcus," Daniel whispered, her voice cracking. "It's that you're erasing me. You're moving Jessica in tomorrow into the house I painted, the house I designed." Marcus let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a sound devoid of warmth. He leaned forward, dropping the facade of the polite professional. "Jessica is 24, Daniel. She's vibrant. She fits the brand. You—" He gestured vaguely at her, his eyes scanning her simple beige cardigan and lack of jewelry. "You've become heavy, boring. A doctor's wife needs to look a certain way. You look like a librarian who got lost." His lawyer, a shark-faced man named Mr. Coburn, cleared his throat. "Ms. Vance, if you don't sign now, we go to trial. And given Mr. Sterling's resources and the ironclad nature of the prenuptial agreement, you will lose. And you will be liable for his legal fees, which are currently sitting at roughly $30,000. Daniel looked down at the paper. 7 years. Gone. She remembered the nights she stayed up formatting his research papers, the weekends she spent charming investors for his clinic. She had been his shadow, his engine, and now that he had reached the summit, he was cutting the rope. She picked up the cheap plastic pen provided by the firm. "Fine," she said, her voice hollow. "I'll sign." Smart girl. Marcus smirked, pulling out his phone to send a text, likely to Jessica. Daniel scribbled her name. Daniel Vance. It felt like signing a death warrant for her past self. As soon as the pen lifted from the paper, Marcus snatched the document away as if he were afraid she'd eat it. "Great," Marcus said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "Coburn will handle the filing. Key to the house is on the table. You have until 5:00 p.m. to get your boxes out of the garage. I don't want Jessica seeing your clutter when she moves in." "You're a monster," Daniel said, standing up. Her legs felt weak. "I'm a realist," Marcus corrected, flashing that charming smile that had fooled her and half of New York. "And you, Daniel, your history." The elevator ride down to the lobby was silent, suffocating. Marcus stood with his back to her, watching the numbers tick down. When the doors opened, the lobby of the skyscraper was bustling with the lunchtime rush of Midtown Manhattan. It was raining outside, a cold, grey November rain that soaked through the soul. Daniel didn't have an umbrella. She had left it in the car Marcus was keeping. She stepped out of the revolving doors and felt the icy bite of the wind. She wrapped her arms around herself, stepping to the side to avoid the rush of businessmen. Marcus stepped out behind her, unfurling a large black umbrella. He didn't offer to share it. "Well," he said, adjusting his cuffs. "This is it. Good luck, Daniel. Try not to fail too hard." He looked toward the valet stand, where his Porsche Panamera was waiting. The valet, a young kid named Leo, who knew Daniel, looked between them with sad eyes. "Mr. Sterling," Leo said, holding the door open. "Thanks, Leo," Marcus said, tossing him a $5 bill. He turned back to Daniel one last time. "Do you need cab fare?" "Oh, wait, I forgot. You don't take charity. You have your pride." He laughed again, a cruel barking sound. "God, I don't know how I put up with you for so long. Look at you. You're pathetic. Standing in the rain, no husband, no job, no future. You're 32, Daniel. In this city, you're invisible." Daniel bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. She refused to cry. Not in front of him. She stared at the wet pavement, watching the reflection of the neon lights smear in the puddles. "Just go, Marcus," she whispered. "I am going," he sneered. "I'm going to the Four Seasons for lunch with my fiancée. You enjoy the subway. Try not to get mugged." He made a show of getting into the driver's seat, revving the engine loudly. The exhaust fumes hit Daniel in the face, making her cough. He rolled down the window, grinning. "Bye, Elle. Don't call." He was about to put the car in gear. He wanted to spray her with puddle water as he drove off. It was the petty cherry on top of his victory sundae. But he couldn't move, because a massive vehicle had just pulled up directly in front of his Porsche, blocking him in completely. It wasn't just a car, it was a fortress on wheels, a customized Rolls-Royce Phantom, elongated and armored, painted a matte black that seemed to absorb the light around it. It had diplomatic flags on the fenders, not country flags, but a crest of gold and onyx. The sheer size of the vehicle brought the bustling street to a halt. Tourists stopped to take photos. Even the jaded New Yorkers paused. Vehicles like this didn't just appear unless someone very, very important was inside. Marcus honked his horn aggressively. "Hey, move it. I'm trying to leave." The Rolls-Royce didn't budge. Instead, the rear door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, well over 6'2", wearing a charcoal three-piece suit that fit him with the kind of precision that made Marcus's Brioni look like a rack rental. He wore no coat despite the freezing rain. He had dark hair, swept back, sharp cheekbones, and eyes the color of steel. He moved with a predatory grace, ignoring the rain, ignoring the traffic, ignoring Marcus's honking. He walked straight toward Daniel. Marcus, sensing his spotlight being stolen, rolled down his window further and stuck his head out. "Hey, buddy, you're blocking the lane. Who do you think you are?" The stranger stopped. He slowly turned his head to look at Marcus. The look was brief, dismissive, like a lion looking at a buzzing fly. He didn't say a word. He just turned his back on Marcus again. Marcus froze. He knew faces. He knew money. And he realized with a sudden jolt of terror in his gut that he recognized this man. It couldn't be. The man stopped in front of Daniel. She was trembling wet hair plastered to her cheeks, looking like a drowned rat. She looked up, confusion warring with fear in her eyes. "Daniel," the man said. His voice was a deep baritone that seemed to cut through the noise of the city. Daniel blinked, wiping rain from her eyes. She squinted at him. Do I know you?" The man didn't smile, but his eyes softened. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a handkerchief, white silk monogrammed. He gently reached out and dabbed a raindrop from her chin. "I am Julian Thorne," he said. The name rippled through the crowd nearby. Someone gasped. Julian Thorne, the CEO of Vanguardian Global, the man who had just bought the entire skyline of Hudson Yards, the recluse billionaire who was rumored to have more political influence than the Senate. Marcus, sitting in his Porsche, felt the blood drain from his face. Julian Thorne was a client he had been trying to land for 2 years. He had sent gift baskets emails called his assistants. He had been rejected every time. Why was Julian Thorne standing in the rain with his ex-wife? "I've been looking for you for a long time, Daniel." Julian said, his voice low and intense. "My grandmother. She never stopped talking about the girl in the library." Daniel's eyes widened. "Mrs. Thorne. The lady with the crossword puzzles. I used to help her with her reading when I volunteered at the senior center. Years ago. She passed away last week," Julian said, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "She left a letter, and she left instructions. She told me that the only person who ever treated her with genuine kindness, without knowing who she was a girl named Daniel Vance." Julian signaled to his driver, a massive man who instantly appeared with a large black umbrella, holding it over Daniel, shielding her completely. "She told me you were in trouble," Julian continued. "I see she was right." Julian turned his head slightly, his gaze locking onto Marcus, who was now paralyzed in his driver's seat. "Is that the inconvenience?" Julian asked, tilting his head toward the Porsche. Daniel looked at Marcus. For the first time all day, she didn't feel small. She looked at Julian's powerful frame, then back at Marcus, who looked suddenly tiny in his expensive car. "He's my ex-husband," Daniel said softly. "Ex," Julian repeated. "Good." Julian extended his hand to Daniel. "Come with me, Daniel. We have much to discuss. And my car is significantly warmer than the sidewalk." Daniel hesitated. I look a mess. I have nothing." "You have dignity," Julian said firmly, "which is more than I can say for the man in the Porsche." Daniel took his hand. It was warm and strong. As Julian guided her toward the open door of the Phantom, Marcus scrambled out of his car into the rain. "Wait, Mr. Thorne! Julian!" Marcus shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "I'm Marcus Sterling. I'm the best dermatologist in the city. I sent you a proposal last month. That woman, she's nobody. She's just a housewife." Julian stopped. He didn't turn around. He just spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "A nobody?" Julian asked. He turned slowly. "You just discarded a woman who showed kindness to a dying stranger when she had nothing to gain. You value status, Mr. Sterling. I value character." Julian's eyes narrowed. "And by the way, I own the building your practice is in. Expect a rent review on Monday." He helped Daniel into the car and slammed the heavy door shut, leaving Marcus standing in the rain, his mouth open, as the crowd on the sidewalk began to laugh. The interior of the Rolls-Royce Phantom was quieter than a church and smelled of aged leather and cedar wood. Daniel sat on the edge of the seat, shivering her wet clothes, staining the pristine upholstery. She felt like an intruder in a world she didn't belong to. Julian Thorne pressed a button, and a partition slid up, separating them from the driver. He opened a hidden compartment and poured an amber liquid into a crystal glass. "Brandy," he said, handing it to her. "Drink. You're in shock." Daniel took the glass with trembling hands. The warmth hit her chest, grounding her. "Mr. Thorne, I don't understand. Your grandmother. Eleanor, I just read to her. We did crosswords. She told me she was a retired school teacher. A ghost of a smile touched Julian's lips. Grandmother liked to blend in. She hated the sycophants who only wanted her for her name. She spent her last years at that centre, specifically to find people who were genuine. She called you the girl with the sad eyes and the kind heart. Julian reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick, cream-coloured envelope sealed with red wax. She wanted me to give you this immediately after her passing. I've been trying to track you down for 3 days, but it seems you've been busy, divesting yourself of dead weight. Daniel opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a legal document. My dearest Daniel, if you are reading this, I am gone. And if Julian has found you, it means you are likely in a time of need. You listened to an old woman complain about her arthritis when you had your own burdens to carry. You never asked for a dime. You only brought me blueberry muffins. I have instructed Julian to appoint you as the director of the Thorn Cultural Trust. It comes with a salary of $250,000 a year, a company apartment in Tribeca, and the responsibility of deciding where our charity money goes. You have a good heart, Daniel. Don't let the world harden it. And don't let that husband of yours dim your light. Love Eleanor. Daniel gasped, covering her mouth. Tears, hot and fast, spilled over. 250 $250,000. I can't accept this. I'm not qualified. I'm just a... You are exactly what the trust needs. Julian interrupted, his voice firm. We have enough MBAs and sharks. We need a human being. And besides... He leaned back, his steel-grey eyes assessing her. My grandmother added a clause. If I don't ensure you are taken care of, I lose my voting rights on the board for the next fiscal year. So really, Daniel, you'd be doing me a favour. The car slowed to a halt. Daniel looked out the tinted window. They weren't at an office building. They were at the entrance of the Pierre Hotel. Why are we here? She asked. Because you cannot start your new life in wet clothes, Julian said. I have a stylist waiting in the penthouse suite. We have a gala to attend on Friday. It will be your introduction to New York society as the new director. Friday. Daniel panicked. But I'm a mess. My hair, my weight, Julian leaned forward, invading her personal space, just enough to make her breath hitch. He looked at her not with pity, but with intensity. Daniel, looking at you, I see a woman who has been told she is nothing for so long she started to believe it. We are going to change the narrative. Marcus Sterling treated you like a background character. As of today, you are the protagonist. The glossy veneer of Dr. Marcus Sterling's life began to crack not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating efficiency of a hostile corporate takeover. It was Tuesday, just 3 days after the divorce signing. Marcus sat in his state-of-the-art office at Sterling Dermatology, an office he considered the crown jewel of his success. The room, decorated with avant-garde sculptures and expensive, intimidating leather furniture, was suddenly oppressive. Across from him, the space was occupied by a woman Marcus had never seen before, Ms. Cassandra Voss, Senior Acquisitions Manager for Vanguardian Global Real Estate. She wore a severely tailored steel-grey suit and radiated an air of total unchallenged authority. I don't understand, Marcus stammered, his usual smooth doctor's composure dissolving rapidly. He gestured at the official letter resting on his desk, a letter bearing the elegant, severe crest of the Thorn family. $30,000 a month, Ms. Voss, that's a 300% increase. We had a locked-in rate with the previous owners. Ms. Voss didn't even shift in her chair. She simply adjusted the immaculate cuff of her jacket. The previous ownership group was liquidated on Monday, Dr. Sterling. Vanguardian Global acquired this building, 345 Park, on Tuesday 2 days ago. New management means new valuation. As you know, the rental market in this specific zip code is fiercely competitive. Marcus felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. This is predatory. This is insane. My practice is a beacon in this neighborhood. I have clientele who demand this location. Bizisu. Voss tilted her head, her expression one of utter boredom. Then your clientele and the prestige of your practice should have no difficulty covering the new rental rate. The fee is payable on the first of the month. Given the change in ownership, we require a guaranteed wire transfer within the next 5 business days to hold your lease. If we do not receive it, we will activate the 30-day termination clause outlined in your new contract, and the space will be put back on the market. She stood up, her movement sharp and decisive. Marcus scrambled to his feet, knocking his silver pen off the desk. Wait, Ms. Voss. I sent a detailed proposal to Mr. Julian Thorne last year. We could be a health partner for his executives. Surely there is room for negotiation. Mr. Thorne's decisions regarding tenancy are based purely on market value, Dr. Sterling. He does not negotiate with standard commercial renters, she replied, her voice flat. Your prior attempts to contact him were noted, but irrelevant to this transaction. Good day. She left the office, leaving the air conditioner humming loudly in the sudden echoing silence. Marcus stood there, staring at the closed door, the reality of the situation slamming into him. This wasn't just a rent hike, this was a targeted financial assassination. Julian Thorne hadn't just insulted him, he was dismantling his career. The irony was a bitter metallic taste in his mouth. The man he had contemptuously blocked in the street was now the man holding the leash to his entire professional existence. He tried to call his lawyer Mr. Coburn, but was immediately routed to an assistant who informed him that Mr. Coburn requires a $10,000 retainer renewal before taking any calls, Dr. Sterling. Marcus slammed the phone down. Daniel. He needed Daniel. She handled the administrative chaos. She was the one who could track the loopholes, find the hidden assets, and talk down predatory vendors. Daniel. The very thought brought a fresh wave of sick jealousy. He had been so quick to declare her irrelevant, and now he was floundering. Just as his paranoia peaked, the heavy oak door swung open, and Jessica strutted in. She was engrossed in her phone, mid-text, looking flawless in an expensive, tiny designer skirt. She dropped onto the plush Italian leather sofa without asking. "Babe, you look like garbage," she announced, finally glancing up. "Did you lose a patient or something?" "Anyway, my Amex got declined at Bergdorf's. The limit needs to be raised like yesterday. I need that new Bottega bag and it's $4,500. Marcus stared at her. The sound of her demanding voice, the sight of her careless entitlement was suddenly grating. When he was married to Daniel, they rarely spent more than $500 on non-essential items, and every penny was accounted for. He had hated it then, viewing it as her controlling nature. Now faced with Jessica's bottomless appetite, Daniel's thrift looked like discipline. "I can't raise the limit, Jessica," Marcus snapped, rubbing his temples. "I'm facing a 300% rent increase. I might lose the practice. We need to cut back." Jessica stopped scrolling. Her mouth fell open in genuine shock. "Cut back? What does that even mean?" "Like no more. Nobu Marcus. I don't do cutbacks. You're a doctor, a successful one. Fix it." She crossed her arms, pouting. "God, you've been so basic since the divorce was finalized. You were so much more fun when you were chasing me. Now you're just stressed and cheap. I need the house, too. This apartment you put me in smells like old takeout. We need to redo the house, all white marble floors, a home gym. It'll be at least $150K. Marcus felt a sharp, cold realization slice through the fog of his self-pity. Jessica didn't love him. She loved the idea of him. She loved the status of a successful Upper East Side doctor. Daniel, for all her flaws in his mind, had loved him, or at least the potential she saw in him. "You know what, Jessica?" Marcus said, his voice dangerously low. "The house is not being renovated. The house, in fact, is probably going to be sold if I can't secure $100,000 in liquid assets by the weekend." "Sell the house!" Jessica shrieked, jumping off the couch. "Where will I live? This is ridiculous. What kind of successful doctor doesn't have $100,000 in savings?" The kind whose ex-wife helped him navigate a malpractice suit and saved him from financial ruin multiple times, only to be thrown out with nothing, leaving him to realize she was the actual administrative spine of his entire operation. Marcus shouted, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. Jessica backed away slowly, her beautiful face contorted in distaste. "You! Don't yell at me. I'm leaving. Call me when you're fun again, and when you can pay my bills." She grabbed her purse and slammed the door behind her. Marcus was left alone, surrounded by the expensive trappings of a life that was now collapsing around him. He felt trapped in a golden cage, realizing that by forcing Daniel out, he had destroyed the infrastructure that kept the cage standing. He walked over to the window, staring out at the midtown skyline. He hated Julian Thorne. He hated him for being richer, better dressed, and now for systematically ruining him. Suddenly his phone buzzed. It wasn't a text. It was a news alert, a link shared by a disgruntled colleague attached with a single skeptical emoji. The headline blazed across the screen: "Billionaire Julian Thorne escorts mystery woman on Tiffany's shopping spree." Marcus's blood ran cold. He clicked the link, his hand shaking so violently he almost dropped the phone. The accompanying photo was clear, taken by a long lens. Julian Thorne, looking effortlessly powerful, was leading a woman out of the flagship Tiffany & Co. store. The woman was wearing sunglasses, but the angle of her jaw, the specific shade of her auburn hair, the way she carried herself, it was unmistakable. "Daniel." Marcus breathed a sound, somewhere between a curse and a choke. He frantically scrolled to the second, more detailed image. It was a close-up of the woman's left hand, shielding her eyes from the sun, and prominently displayed on her ring finger, the wrong hand for an engagement, but still significant, was a spectacular, almost blinding, canary yellow diamond. It was massive, a showstopper that Marcus instantly recognized as something only seen in auction catalogs. The caption beneath the photo was the final nail in the coffin. Thorne is rumored to have acquired the rare Son of Cairo diamond for his new companion. Experts estimate the stone's value to exceed $2.5 million, $2.5 million. Marcus had given Daniel a cubic zirconia ring when they got engaged, claiming they needed to save money for his medical practice, promising to replace it with a real one when they made it. He never did. He had mocked her for wearing cheap jewelry. Now she was wearing a diamond, worth more than his entire career. The jealousy was no longer a cold sweat. It was a roaring furnace in his chest. She knew. Marcus whispered, the paranoia taking hold. She planned this. She was seeing him, that whole story about the library lady. It was all a setup. The thought twisted his mind into a painful knot of victimhood. She wasn't a victim. She was a conspirator. She had manipulated him, played the role of the devoted, boring wife, only to execute a perfectly timed escape into the arms of a billionaire. He felt the desperate need to reclaim control, to inflict pain, to prove that he was still the powerful one. He reached for his phone and dialed Coburn's emergency line, throwing caution and the $10,000 retainer to the wind. "Coburn, you listen to me. You need to file a motion immediately. Fraud, undue influence. She was hiding assets and committed marital misconduct. I want to contest the divorce. I want half of what she has." The lawyer, roused from his afternoon slump, sounded professional but wary. "Dr. Sterling, we have a signed, finalized decree. The prenup protects your pre-marital assets, but it protects her post-marital acquisitions as well. She acquired these assets, the relationship, the money, the diamond after the papers were signed. You have no legal claim. But she was in contact with him before she must have been—" Marcus pleaded, his voice cracking. "Doesn't that count as hiding future earning potential?" "It counts as nothing, Dr. Sterling," Coburn stated dryly. "The document is valid. You signed it, and you signed it in good faith. You're simply watching your ex-wife have a spectacular upswing in fortune, and that unfortunately is not grounds for litigation. If you continue to harass her or Mr. Thorne, you will open yourself up to a far more serious civil suit. I advise you to accept the situation." Coburn hung up, leaving Marcus staring at the blinding $2.5 million diamond on Daniel's finger. Accept the situation? Never. Marcus was a man who believed the world was ordered by status, and his status was rapidly collapsing. Daniel, the woman he had relegated to the level of a forgotten piece of furniture, was ascending to the height of the stratosphere, pulled there by the gravity of the man who was now his executioner. He had to get to her. He had to expose the lie. He had to make the world see that she was still his property, still his mistake. He needed to find her, humiliate her, and tear down her gilded life, even if it meant destroying what little he had left. The revenge, he decided, would be worth the price. He spent the rest of the day in a frenzy of drunken calls and panicked internet searches, determined to crash whatever glittering event Julian Thorne would inevitably take her to next. He needed a confrontation, a public scene where he could seize back the narrative that had been stolen from him. The Metropolitan Charity Gala was more than just a fundraising event. It was the gravitational center of New York's power orbit. Held beneath the soaring ceilings of the Museum of Modern Art, it was a tapestry woven from bespoke silks, ancient money, and calculated influence. Daniel stood at the apex of the grand staircase, leading down into the main hall, Julian Thorne's hand resting lightly proprietarily on the small of her back. The sudden overwhelming silence that fell over the thousands of people below was palpable, a collective gasp of curiosity. Julian had chosen the aesthetic deliberately. Daniel's custom Oscar de la Renta gown was a masterpiece of asymmetry in deep, luminous emerald green, a color that made her eyes look like moss agate and contrasted powerfully with the fiery auburn of her hair, which was styled in severe, elegant waves. She wasn't hidden behind excessive jewelry. The only major piece was the Sun of Cairo diamond on her right hand, catching the light like a small captive sun. She looked expensive, sophisticated, and most importantly, unapproachable. This was not the Daniel Vance who wore cardigans and stood in the rain. This was the director of the Thorne Cultural Trust, Julian's chosen partner for the evening. "Remember what we discussed?" Julian murmured, his lips close to her ear, a voice that was pure, low confidence. "They are here to see you. They want to know your story. Give them the legend." Daniel took a deep, steadying breath. She had spent the last 3 days not just with stylists and makeup artists, but with Julian's public relations and media training teams. They taught her to hold her shoulders back, to make eye contact slightly over the crowd, to project dominance, and to never under any circumstances react to a flashbulb. "I think I'm ready," she whispered. "No," Julian corrected, giving her back a reassuring squeeze. "You are ready." They began their slow, deliberate descent. Every step was a headline. The moment their feet touched the marble floor, the cameras erupted. Daniel didn't flinch. She smiled, a genuine slight curve of the lips, acknowledging the moment without being consumed by it. Julian introduced her to the elite circle, Senator Harrington, a man who controlled billions in defense contracts, Dame Vivienne Chen, the formidable art collector, and Lord Alistair Cromwell, the British banking magnate. To Julian's surprise, Daniel didn't stumble. She remembered details. She complimented Dame Chen on her acquisition of the Rothko piece Julian's gallery had been chasing. She engaged the senator on the nuances of the new environmental bills, referencing articles she used to read late at night while Marcus slept. She spoke conversational French with the delegation from the Musée d'Orsay. She realized that Marcus hadn't just ignored her. He had actively suppressed the intelligent, curious woman she was. She had been keeping herself sharp, reading, listening, absorbing everything, not for him but for a future she hadn't known she was preparing for. Julian watched her with undisguised pride, stepping back just enough to let her command the conversation. Suddenly, a disturbance rippled through the eastern side of the hall near the open bar. The elegant chatter faltered. A man was shoving through the impeccably dressed crowd. His dinner jacket rumpled his face, a mask of sweaty, desperate fury. He was shouting something incomprehensible aimed directly at the center of the room. Marcus Sterling. He had managed to talk his way past the final security checkpoint by citing an urgent medical emergency and using the name of an actual attending physician, a distant acquaintance. He had spent the last 48 hours watching his life crumble. His practice was hemorrhaging clients, his lease was officially terminated, and Jessica had blocked him on all social media after selling the Panamera they co-owned. He was fueled by cheap bourbon and a blinding cocktail of jealousy and self-pity. He saw Daniel surrounded by the titans of industry, looking like royalty, and the sight broke the last thread of his sanity. Daniel Vance. What the hell is this, you witch? The crowd parted instantly, creating an uncomfortable, horrified circle of silence around Marcus. His arrival was like a sewage leak in a pristine banquet hall. Julian, his expression unreadable, placed his hand on Daniel's shoulder. Security is moving, he murmured to her. We can ignore him. Daniel shook her head slightly, her gaze fixed on Marcus. His hair was askew, his makeup of wealth dissolving under the scrutiny. She saw not the successful doctor she had married, but a small, petty tyrant who had lost his kingdom and was now flailing. The fear, the deep, visceral terror Marcus used to inspire was gone, replaced by a cold, surgical clarity. No, Julian, she said, her voice quiet but firm. He needs to be dealt with, and I'm the one who needs to do it. She took one measured step away from Julian, directly into the spotlight of the gathered onlookers. Hello, Marcus, Daniel said, her voice carrying an unnerving calm. I wasn't aware you were invited to this event. Given the sudden insolvency of your clinic, I assumed you would be busy liquidating assets. Her use of dry corporate language in the face of his screaming rage was a psychological masterstroke. It was the language of power, not emotion. Marcus stumbled closer, his eyes wide. He lunged slightly, pointing a trembling finger at the diamond ring. Insolvency. You caused it. You snake. You set me up. That ring. That dress. You're sleeping with him. You're a gold-digging whore who tricked me into signing the papers so you could run off with a better meal ticket. The collective gasps around the room were audible. The senator looked disgusted. Dame Chen looked fascinated, her lip curled in an expression of pure schadenfreude. Julian Thorne stepped into Daniel's space, placing himself slightly behind her, a towering presence of silent threat. I advise you to lower your voice, Mr. Sterling. Julian's voice rumbled icy and low. You are seconds away from being removed by force. Stay out of this, Thorne, Marcus yelled, sweat beading on his forehead. "This is a domestic matter. She was my wife. She's trying to steal my reputation." Daniel's spine straightened. Her voice, though still calm, gained weight and projection. "Your reputation?" Daniel challenged, meeting his frenzied gaze head-on. "Marcus, your reputation was built on 7 years of my administrative work, my savings, and my relentless cleanup of your messes. Let's be honest, shall we? You didn't lose me. You discarded me because I ceased to be useful to your brand." She took 2 slow, deliberate steps toward him, closing the gap until they were barely a foot apart. The cameras flashed furiously, capturing the moment of the exposed, frantic man being challenged by the poised, diamond-clad woman. "You called me boring, heavy, and invisible. You boasted that I was 32 and had no job, no future, and would be taking the bus to my mother's house. You made sure I walked away from our marriage with nothing but a used Toyota and $4,000. She paused, letting the raw facts sink into the listening audience. "And now, Marcus, you stand here demanding a share of a life that was created after you dismissed me. You are contesting a divorce that you initiated claiming fraud, because the woman you threw out happens to be sought after by a man who appreciates talent." Her voice hardened to a whip crack. "It wasn't an affair, Marcus. It was called karma. It was called justice. And it was called being recognized for my actual value, which you were too blind and too arrogant to see." Marcus's composure finally shattered. "You can't talk about value. You're worthless. You helped me cover up the Greta Sinclair malpractice suit. I'll expose you. You handled the settlement." The atmosphere in the room changed again. Malpractice suit. This was the kind of ugly, actionable dirt the elite hated. Daniel didn't flinch. She leaned in her voice, now a low, dangerous whisper that only Marcus Julian and the closest reporters could hear. "Yes, I did. I handled the settlement. With the $200,000 I inherited from my grandmother, which you demanded I use to protect your career. I saved you from losing your license, Marcus. I committed financial suicide for you. I was faithful, I was loyal, and I was your biggest asset." She pulled back her eyes, holding his. "And now Julian Thorne, the man who owns the building your practice is in, is offering me a 6-figure salary to manage a multi-million-dollar foundation. You are claiming I committed fraud by being capable. Marcus, you didn't lose an asset. You lost a partner. And now you have the privilege of watching your former partner shine at an event you couldn't afford a ticket to. 2 enormous security guards in tailored black uniforms materialized beside Marcus, their presence overwhelming. Mr. Sterling, the head of security, announced, his voice booming into the brief silence. "You are disturbing a private, ticketed event. You must leave now." Marcus thrashed, spitting incoherent rage. She's lying, I'll sue, I'll ruin you both." Julian stepped fully forward, overshadowing Daniel. He didn't raise his voice, but the casual authority in his words was absolute. "You will not sue anyone, Mr. Sterling." Julian stated, his eyes cold. "You are in violation of your practice lease, which I now control. I have seen the preliminary financial reports of Sterling Dermatology. I suggest you focus on your imminent bankruptcy, not on harassing women." He nodded to the security guards. "Escort Mr. Sterling to the curb. Ensure he is not seen here again. If he returns, the police should be notified regarding stalking charges." As Marcus was dragged away, cursing and flailing, Julian turned back to the crowd, his posture effortlessly resuming control. He didn't apologize for the disruption. He simply dismissed it. "My apologies for the small interlude," Julian said to the senator, picking up the thread of their previous conversation, as if nothing had happened. Some people are simply ill-equipped to handle disappointment, Senator. Now, Daniel, you were mentioning your plans for the new Arts and Technology Initiative. Daniel met his gaze, gratitude and respect mixing with her own surging confidence. She was safe. She was seen. She was powerful. She smiled beautifully, genuinely, and stepped forward to continue the discussion, leaving the shame of Marcus Sterling to be swept away with the discarded champagne flutes and the night's trash. She was no longer Mrs. Marcus Sterling. She was Daniel Vance, director. And she had just won her life back, not with a lawyer, but with poise, truth, and the unwavering support of the man who knew her true worth. The adrenaline that had fueled Daniel through the gala confrontation began to dissipate as the Rolls-Royce glided silently away from the MoMA. The car was a sanctuary, a world away from the flashbulbs and the hushed, judgmental whispers of high society. Daniel leaned her head against the cool leather, utterly drained. Julian had been quietly watching her. He reached across the expansive interior and gently took her hand, his touch firm and anchoring. "You were magnificent tonight." He repeated, his voice devoid of the usual billionaire stoicism. "Truly magnificent. That was the first time I've seen a genuine fight in your eyes, not just sadness." Daniel managed a weak smile. "I owe it all to the dress, the diamond, and the fact that Marcus was drunk enough to try and cause a scene. I think I just spent 7 years internalizing every mean thing he ever said. Tonight I finally threw it all up." "Good," Julian said, his thumb brushing the skin on the back of her hand. "But the fight wasn't in the emerald gown, Daniel. It was in you. You didn't just dismiss him. You exposed him. You took back your narrative." The car was heading toward the Upper East Side, towards the luxurious Tribeca apartment Julian had insisted she take. Daniel knew this night had marked a professional turning point, but she felt a strange, deeper current running between them, something far beyond employer and employee. She looked down at the Son of Cairo diamond, a stone worth more than her former life combined. "Julian," she began, gently extracting her hand and reaching to remove the ring. "I need to give this back. It served its purpose. It was a perfect prop." Julian stopped her, placing his large hand over hers. "Keep it." "I can't. It's too much. It's meaningless jewelry," she protested. Julian shook his head. "It's not meaningless. It was my grandmother's. She wore it sparingly, only for occasions where she needed to remind people who she was. She bequeathed it to me with specific instructions. Give this to the woman whose light you want to protect." Daniel's breath hitched. That's very kind of her. And you? But I'm not." "You are, Daniel." Julian interrupted, his steel-grey eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that demanded attention. "I told you earlier that my grandmother gave me a mission. And I told you that you were exactly what the Thorn Trust needed. Both are true. But there is a deeper reason I came for you, a truth that precedes Eleanor's will and Marcus's cruelty. The air in the cabin grew thick-heavy with unspoken history. Years ago, Julian started, his voice dropping to a low, rough timbre. "Before I was Julian Thorne, CEO of Vanguardian Global, I was just Julian, a reckless 26-year-old idiot. I drove fast, too fast. I was on the I-95, maybe 5 years ago, heading upstate in a terrible thunderstorm." Daniel watched him, suddenly realizing the gravity of this confession. He looked vulnerable, something she wouldn't have thought possible. "I hydroplaned, totaled the car. I was trapped. The steering column had collapsed. My leg was pinned and my head was bleeding. The rain was torrential. It was dark and I couldn't move. I remember the smell of gasoline and fear." He paused, collecting himself. I thought I was dying. The shock was starting to set in. People drove past. They saw the wreckage, but no one stopped. Then, a small, beat-up hatchback pulled over 50 yards away. The hazard lights flashed. Julian's eyes, usually so sharp and focused, seemed to be looking back in time. A woman got out. Small, soaking wet. She crawled into the car over the mangled back seat and shattered glass. She ignored the blood, ignored the fumes. She just reached for my hand. Daniel's hand flew instinctively to her left wrist, where for years she had worn a cheap silver charm bracelet, a tiny bird-shaped charm she'd bought at a flea market. It was the bracelet Marcus had finally convinced her to throw away last week, calling it tacky. She didn't try to get me out, Julian continued. She just held my hand and talked. She talked about the weather, about her stupid, demanding job, about how she wished she could just sit and read a good book. She talked about anything and everything to keep me conscious, to keep the panic from taking over. She stayed until the police and the paramedics arrived. When the emergency teams finally cut me out, they turned to thank her, and she was gone, vanished into the rain. Julian finally looked at Daniel again, his gaze piercing. She saved my life. The doctors said if I had lost consciousness in that rain and blood, I might not have made it. But I never saw her face in the dark and the rain. I only knew her voice, and one small, specific detail. He reached out and gently took her empty wrist, tracing the skin where the bracelet used to be. She was wearing a silver charm bracelet. The charm was a tiny metal bird. The paramedic who helped me out told me he saw it glint when she grabbed my hand. Daniel was no longer shivering from the cold or the shock of the night. She was trembling with a profound emotional realization. It was the I-95, she whispered, tears welling up. I had just finished a double shift waiting tables. I saw the car and I couldn't drive past. I had to stop. Julian nodded slowly, a look of profound relief washing over his face. I had a team searching for 5 years. We searched insurance records, police reports, and even cross-referenced hospital admissions. We couldn't find her. The only trace was the memory of her voice. When I was watching you outside the courthouse, Julian explained, his voice intense. You were yelling at Marcus, your voice, high and strained from the argument. But then when you thought no one was listening, you sighed, and the inflection, the cadence, it was like a lock opening in my memory, the gentle voice of the woman who kept me alive. He squeezed her hand again. I didn't just meet you because of my grandmother, Daniel. I hunted you down. I saw a cruel man destroying a kind woman, and I realized that was the man who had the power to make the woman who saved my life look pathetic. He leaned in the crystal glass partition, reflecting the city lights around them. Marcus threw away his wife, but he also unknowingly humiliated the woman who saved the life of his new landlord. I came to return a favor, a life debt, and to put the man who tried to extinguish your light exactly where he belongs in the shadows. Daniel finally allowed the tears to fall. This wasn't a sudden transactional romance. This was destiny, a long-ago act of kindness repaid with justice and salvation. The diamond, Julian said, lifting her hand again. It's not a prop, Daniel. It's a thank you. It's a recognition of the value you hold, a value that doesn't depreciate. She looked at the ring, the stone flashing fire in the dark. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about validation. You saved my life twice, Julian, she said, her voice husky. Once in a car wreck, and again today. Then let's make it a partnership. Julian said, his business acumen immediately resurfacing, though softer now. Eleanor's will gives you the cultural trust, But I want you to be more than that. I want you on my advisory board. Your greatest strength isn't just kindness. It's your keen, underappreciated understanding of human motivation and value. You understand the real costs of things, something none of my existing board members do. He painted a picture of a future where Daniel used her sharp mind, honed by years of surviving Marcus's manipulation, to guide multi-million-dollar investments towards ethical and impactful ventures. He didn't just want to elevate her. He genuinely needed her perspective. "I need your eyes on the world, Daniel," he concluded. "Eyes that see the true value of kindness." Daniel looked at the man who had been her guardian angel, and now wanted to be her partner. He wasn't a knight in shining armor. He was a powerhouse who respected her strength and was willing to wait for her to recognize it herself. "Marcus said I was invisible," Daniel murmured, lifting her chin. "Tonight you proved him wrong. But let's prove him irrelevant," Julian countered. "So, Ms. Vance, the next chapter. What do you say?" Daniel took a deep breath, the air now feeling clean and full of possibility. She placed her hand in his. "I say," Daniel replied, her voice steady and ringing with new authority. "We start by firing his lawyer." Julian smiled, a genuine, powerful smile that reached his eyes. "Already done. Welcome aboard." The Rolls-Royce pulled up to the curb, its journey complete, and a new life ready to begin. And that is how Daniel Vance went from signing divorce papers in the rain to running an empire. Marcus Sterling lost his practice, his mistress, and his reputation, eventually moving to a small town in Ohio, where nobody knew his name. Daniel and Julian didn't rush into marriage. They built a partnership, a friendship, and eventually a love that was stronger than any contract. It just goes to show sometimes, when you think you've lost everything, you're actually just clearing space for something better. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, karma, and romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. And tell me in the comments, do you think Marcus deserved worse? I read every comment. Thanks for watching.